Okay, let's untack this. Have you ever stopped to think about what you actually own when you buy, say, a movie or a song in today's digital world?
Hmm.
What happens when a piece of entertainment can be copied perfectly, infinitely at, well, virtually no cost?
Right.
And who gets to decide the rules for this new reality? It's a seemingly simple question, but the implications are anything but.
What's fascinating here, I think, is how this seemingly straightforward question about ownership,
Yeah.
it just quickly unravels. You pull one thread, and suddenly you're tangled in this complex web
Hmm.
of legal, economic, cultural challenges.
Yeah.
We're talking about the fundamental nature of intellectual property itself, and how it clashes, really clashes, with the boundless possibilities of digital technology.
That's so.
Well, the very definition of what constitutes a copy or even theft, it becomes incredibly fluid, especially when you can duplicate something with just a click without diminishing the original at all.
Exactly. So today, we're taking a deep dive into this fascinating, often pretty contentious world of intellectual property rights, specifically in film and media.
Hmm.
We'll explore the evolving definitions, some surprising historical conflicts, the economic tug-of-war between creators and consumers,
Yeah, that's a big one.
and the crucial, maybe often accidental role of digital distribution in preserving our cultural heritage.
Right. Our mission here is to really understand how the film and media industries have grappled with, well, the problem, as they saw it, of digital copying,
Okay.
how their plans to control content have actually played out, and what lessons we can look back on, not just for the past, but, for the future of creative output and consumption.
And we're drawing from a whole stack of sources for this,
Oh,
correct?
absolutely. We've got legal documents, industry reports, we've looked at public forums, even some candid thoughts from people right there on the front lines.
Yeah.
We want to examine the real-world outcomes, the check results, if you will, of different approaches, and maybe consider alternative pathways forward.
Sounds good. Because the history here is full of unexpected twists, isn't it?
Oh, completely. You'll find it's often really counterintuitive. What seemed like a disaster often turned into something else entirely.
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting. Imagine a powerful industry leader standing before Congress declaring that a new technology is akin to a Boston Strangler for their entire business.
Wow.
Sounds like, well, hyperbole, right?
Totally.
Well, that actually happened. In 1982, Jack Valenti, he was the longtime president of the Motion Picture Association of America, the MPAA.
A major figure.
Huge figure.
Yeah.
He stood before a congressional panel and famously declared, and I'm quoting here, "I say to you that the VCR is to the American film producer and the American public as the Boston Strangler is to the woman home alone."
That is quite the statement.
Yeah.
It's almost hard to imagine today, isn't it, with streaming being so normal, that something like the VCR was seen as this, ultimate existential threat.
Exactly.
And that statement, it really encapsulates the industry's initial reaction, doesn't it? It was this fear-driven perception of the VCR.
Pure fear.
They viewed it through such a narrow lens. They focused almost exclusively on its capacity for, unauthorized copying. They completely failed to anticipate its broader market implications.
And the response wasn't just rhetoric, right? They took action.
Oh, definitely. The MPAA's response was swift and aggressive. And it actually started before Valenti's infamous testimony. They'd already begun fighting copyright infringement years earlier.
Really? When?
They set up their film security office way back in 1975, specifically to recover unauthorized recordings of films and prevent duplication.
Wow. Okay, so they were on this early.
Very early.
Yeah.
And by 1986, their concerns had escalated so much that the MPAA formally asked Congress to pass a law. They wanted VCRs to include a special chip, designed specifically to prevent them from making copies.
So baked the control right into the hardware.
Exactly. It was a clear attempt to enforce their perceived control over content right at the hardware level, embedding their strategy directly into consumer electronics.
So, okay, given Valenti's incredibly strong, almost apocalyptic prediction, did the film industry actually collapse? Or did something else, maybe something entirely unexpected happen?
Well, what happened was pretty much the exact opposite. And it's this profound, really counterintuitive lesson in industry adaptation.
Okay.
The home video market, fueled by these very VCRs they feared so much, became an absolutely crucial mainstay of film studio revenues, all through the 1980s and 1990s.
No way.
Seriously. It ended up generating billions of dollars. Eventually, for many films, it dwarfed the money they made in theaters.
Wow.
It just demonstrated the significant market evolution. It proved that new technologies, the ones initially perceived as these existential threats, can often create entirely new markets, new revenue streams.
If you're willing to adapt.
Exactly. If you're willing to adapt and recognize the opportunity within what seems like just a challenge. People clearly wanted to watch movies at home, on their own schedule. The VCR gave them the way to do it.
And beyond that unexpected market boom, there was also a pretty critical legal development happening around the same time, wasn't there, that shaped this landscape?
Indeed. The legal landscape also evolved significantly. The United States Supreme Court played a huge role in this shift.
How so?
With its landmark 1984 ruling in the Sony Corp of America v. Universal City Studios, Inc. case. You probably know it as the Betamax case.
Right, the Betamax case. Very famous.
And that decision found that home copying of broadcast television, just for personal, non-commercial use, that constituted fair use.
Okay, so fair use. That's a key concept.
Absolutely critical. This limited the industry's control over how people personally use content. It enshrined the legality of time shifting, recording a show to watch later.
Which everyone did.
Everyone did. And it highlighted that not all forms of duplication were seen as direct economic harm by the courts. It was a significant check on the industry's attempt to exert, well, total control.
Okay, so even with that major legal setback for the MPAA and the undeniable success of home video, the industry didn't really let up on its public messaging, did it?
Not at all.
I mean, for decades, we've heard that clear message, piracy is stealing, it's been hammered home. But how did the public really react to that aggressive campaign? Was it truly effective in changing people's behavior?
Well, the MPAA's long-standing public fight against digital piracy, heavily emphasizing that piracy is equivalent to stealing message. It continued for many, many years.
Right.
But this aggressive communication often faced a pretty significant disconnect with actual consumer behavior.
How do you mean?
While surveys showed, widespread public awareness that peer-to-peer file sharing was illegal.
People knew it was wrong legally.
They knew. But they continued to engage in it anyway, so it created this paradoxical situation where the public understood the legal definition, but they didn't necessarily internalize it as, like, the moral equivalent of physical theft, not in their own actions, especially when it came to digital files.
That's fascinating. So the message was heard, loud and clear, but maybe not acted upon in the way the industry hoped. What were some of the critiques that emerged about this campaign, particularly from the consumers they were trying to reach?
Well, critiques of the campaign often argued that its accusatory tone alienated loyal fans. It basically treated them like criminals rather than potential customers.
Yeah, that doesn't seem like a great strategy.
Not really. And furthermore, some analyses suggested that other factors were actually hindering sales much more significantly than piracy itself.
Like what?
Things like digital rights management or DRM, those technological barriers designed to prevent copying, which often just frustrated legitimate users.
Right, yeah, DRM is often painful.
Exactly. And then overly restrictive release windows, those staggering content availability across different platforms or regions, and just the general unavailability of content sometimes. Maybe it wasn't released in your country, or it was just way too expensive.
Because people couldn't get it legally, even if they wanted to.
Precisely. So many argued that consumers were turning to unauthorized channels because the legitimate ones were inconvenient, inaccessible, or simply too expensive. It suggested the industry was maybe misdiagnosing the primary drivers of behavior. They were focused on enforcement, but overlooking user experience and accessibility.
And we saw a really interesting paradox play out with like HBO's Game of Thrones, didn't we?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, it was one of the most pirated shows in history, right?
By far.
But HBO's subscriptions reportedly boomed during its run. It almost seems like the widespread piracy might have, paradoxically, boosted HBO subscriptions.
How so?
Well, maybe by expanding its cultural footprint so massively, it created this immense demand, everyone was talking about it, and the legitimate channels, HBO, then capitalized on that buzz.
That's a compelling idea.
People wanted to be part of a cultural conversation, And for many, that eventually meant subscribing to watch it legitimately, to be current, to avoid spoilers.
So the piracy acted like a giant, albeit unintentional, marketing engine.
Exactly. It drove the public conversation and ultimately funneled viewers towards the legitimate platform. It's a surprising takeaway. For really desirable content, widespread piracy might actually fuel legitimate consumption in the long run.
That's an excellent point, and it perfectly illustrates why the term piracy itself can be Well, quite misleading sometimes.
Right, it's not all the same thing.
Not at all. It's often used very broadly, but
Yeah.
it's crucial to understand there are very different types of activities lumped under that umbrella. It's really important to define and distinguish clearly between piracy and counterfeiting.
Okay, what's the key difference?
Piracy, in the context we're often discussing unauthorized duplication and distribution, often for personal use or maybe minimal profit, that typically falls under simple copyright infringement. Historically, for a first offense involving sound recordings or motion pictures, the legal penalty used to be a misdemeanor. Maybe fine, like not more than $25,000. Although even then, the scale could be huge. Remember that sound recording piracy operation in Pennsylvania? Turning out 25 million counterfeit records a year. So the potential profits could still be substantial.
Got it. So that's piracy. What about counterfeiting?
Counterfeiting is different. That involves producing fake goods designed specifically to deceive consumers, to make them believe they're purchasing a legitimate, authorized product.
Ah, so the buyer thinks they're getting the real deal.
Exactly. This often involves organized crime, much higher commercial profits for the distributors, and the consumer pays full market value for a forgery without knowing it's fake.
Okay, that sounds more serious.
And the Justice Department agreed. Through Special Assistant Renee L. Sabala, they clearly stated their belief that counterfeiting, because it defrauds the consuming public, is a far more serious crime than simple piracy.
So the law reflects that difference.
Increasingly, yes. This distinction led to a grading of penalties. While simple copyright infringement might be a misdemeanor, large-scale piracy, and especially counterfeiting, were pursued more and more as felonies. That means stiffer sentences, potential prison time, much higher fines.
Like that bill you mentioned.
Right, a bill like S-691 aimed to make large-scale piracy a felony, potentially carrying a $250,000 fine and up to 5 years in prison. This shift in legal approach was an attempt to match the penalty to the severity and the commercial nature of the infringement. The focus shifted towards stopping those who are really profiting from deceiving the public.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about the economics. If you're a creator, putting your work out there, it feels like a huge gamble. What are the true costs involved in producing creative output? And why is commercial success so often compared to, like, winning the lottery? It's not just about the hours you put in, is it?
Absolutely not. The financial risks borne by publishers, by studios, they're immense. And it leads to what are often described as these lottery-like payout patterns.
Lottery like.
Yeah, consider this staggering reality. Estimates suggest that roughly 76% of musicals, 80% of stage plays, and a whopping 90% of music albums might not even break even.
90%? Wow.
90% don't recoup their costs. This extreme unpredictability means you need enormous prizes for the rare winners, the blockbuster films, the hit albums, the successful plays, just to offset the vast majority of projects that fail.
So the hits pay for all the misses.
Exactly. It's a high-stakes game where a few major successes essentially subsidize many, many failures. It's kind of similar to the pharmaceutical industry, right? They need big profits on successful drugs to cover the huge R&D costs for all the drugs that never make it to market.
That makes sense.
The sheer cost of production, distribution, marketing for creative works means only a tiny fraction ever achieve real profitability.
And for individual creators, the artists themselves, it's not just about covering production costs, right? There's a lot more at stake, especially if they're trying to make a living solely through their art.
Precisely. Beyond the tangible costs, materials, equipment, actual production and time, individual creators also have to cover their basic living expenses.
Sure, gotta eat.
Gotta eat. And more subtly, but just as important, they have to account for opportunity costs.
What's that exactly?
That's the income they don't earn because they're pursuing creative work instead of doing some other, maybe more stable job.
Ah, okay. The income they gave up.
Right. For many, content creation might start as a hobby or investment in a future career. But to sustain it as a livelihood, they need to feel they're getting a fair share of any value their work generates.
It has to pay off eventually.
It has to. And economists recognize that standard supply curves, the kind that work for, humdrum tasks like making phone books, they don't really capture the motivations of creators.
Why not?
Because non-monetary goals, artistic expression, personal fulfillment, cultural impact often dominate. But even pursuing those goals requires a basic level of financial viability. You still need to keep the lights on.
So even if the creative work itself is brilliant, it still needs to be seen or heard, right? And that's where marketing comes in, which adds another huge layer of cost and risk.
Indeed. Marketing plays this crucial, yet incredibly expensive role in achieving commercial success. Just think about the astronomical costs of advertising during something like the Super Bowl.
Millions for 30 seconds.
Exactly. Even .com companies bought most of the ads back in 2000. Or think about how music artists often rely on expensive TV exposure, not just radio play anymore.
Right.
But there is a glimmer of a future where these costs might be dramatically reduced
Oh.
through the increased use of what some call buyer-financed, internet-empowered selection assistants.
Okay, that's a mouthful. What does it mean?
Think highly sophisticated recommendation algorithms, or platforms where users themselves help curate and promote content organically, like word of mouth, but supercharged by the internet.
So grassroots discovery instead of expensive ads.
Potentially, yes. It could lower these publication expenses significantly. It's a way to maybe rethink the marketing model itself, moving from top-down advertising to more community-driven discovery.
This brings us to a really fundamental philosophical question, I think. It seems to underpin a lot of the conflict in this digital age. If we live in a world where digital goods can be perfectly replicated at near zero cost, is it moral to create artificial scarcity through intellectual property laws? It feels like we're debating a very abstract concept, but it has real-world consequences.
It absolutely does. And this raises an important question touching on core economic and ethical principles, especially for digital products. At Reddit discussion you mentioned earlier, it presents this challenge to artificial scarcity really clearly, framing it as potentially an immoral system for digital entertainment.
What's the argument?
The argument basically goes, in a truly post-scarcity world, where everything is readily available, effortlessly reproducible, the whole concept of economic transactions for those goods would be moot, pointless, like how air is free and accessible to everyone. Okay, the idea is, if robots could assemble a yacht or a mansion for free, why would we transact for anything? And the digital realm, with its perfect infinite copies, seems to offer a glimpse into that kind of abundance.
That's a compelling thought experiment, yeah. Envisioning a world where things just exist. But it feels like it overlooks something crucial about how things, both physical goods and digital creations, actually come into existence in the first place.
There's a significant upfront investment, isn't there?
It absolutely does overlook that. While the idea of a post-scarcity world is compelling, we need to counter it with a practical analogy, like the bread example.
Okay, the bread analogy.
If everyone could infinitely duplicate physical goods like bread using some sci-fi device.
Like a replicator from Star Trek.
Exactly. The producer of that bread, the baker, would inevitably go out of business because nobody would buy it. If the bread couldn't be sold, it would just go moldy and the producer would stop making it.
Applying that logic to digital creations, it emphasizes that despite the near zero cost of replication, there is still immense labor, talent, and financial investment involved in the original creation of that digital good.
The first copy costs a lot, the rest are cheap.
Precisely. The artist, the developer, the studio, they all bear those significant upfront costs of creation. Intellectual property laws are, in essence, designed to protect that initial investment, to incentivize new creation by granting creators a temporary monopoly over their work, allowing them a chance to recoup cost and hopefully profit.
So what does this all mean for creators trying to make a living? In a world where their work can be copied so easily, it sounds like a constant struggle, and maybe that narrative of lost sales isn't always accurate.
It is a struggle, and it leads to another really important nuance. A pirated copy doesn't always directly replace a sold copy.
What do you mean?
Well, this is profoundly true, especially if the consumer couldn't afford the original price or couldn't legally access the content anyway. Maybe it wasn't available in their region. And some studies even indicate that the people who pirate the most also tend to spend the most on media overall.
Wait, really? That seems counterintuitive.
It does, but think about it. They are often deeply engaged fans, true enthusiasts. They turn to unauthorized access primarily because of issues like cost. Especially now with streaming services splintering into so many subscriptions, it gets unaffordable collectively.
Yeah, the subscription fatigue is real.
Exactly. Or because of geographic unavailability, there's just no legal way to watch a particular TV show or film in their country. So they're not necessarily trying to avoid paying. They're trying to gain access to content they genuinely desire, but can't get through legitimate channels.
And then there's that concept of downloading bulimia. That's a powerful and, frankly, rather unsettling image. What other surprising consumer behaviors have come to light that challenge that simple lost sales narrative?
Exactly. And that brings us to this phenomenon sometimes dubbed downloading bulimia. It highlights a specific, sometimes compulsive, digital hoarding behavior.
Hoarding digital files.
Yeah. It describes a situation where users stockpile vast amounts of pirated content, movies, music, games, that they have absolutely no time or maybe even no genuine intention to ever consume.
Just collecting it.
Just collecting it. This suggests that piracy isn't always driven by a deliberate desire to avoid a purchase or even to consume the content itself. Sometimes it's simply about the ease of acquisition, the feeling of getting something for free, this perceived abundance. It leads to a digital hoarding behavior rather than a genuine consumption act. So the industry's focus purely on lost sales might be missing the full spectrum of motivations behind unauthorized downloading. It probably requires a deeper assessment of actual consumer habits beyond just looking at revenue numbers.
So if the traditional models are struggling and consumer behavior is way more complex than maybe initially thought, are there alternative compensation models that show promise for creators in this digital landscape? What about something like crowdfunding, where the audience funds the creation up front?
Yeah, crowdfunding platforms are definitely part of the conversation. Jack Conte of Patreon is often cited as an example of an alternative model where creators get paid upfront by their audience.
Right.
Theoretically, this alleviates concerns about post-release unauthorized distribution. The idea is, if the creative work is fully funded before it's even made, then its subsequent duplication or distribution without further payment wouldn't necessarily impact the creator's income directly. They've already been paid.
Okay, that makes sense in theory.
But this what-if scenario, what if all content were crowdfunded? It presents its own challenges. This plan needs to consider scale and the inherent nature of the creative work being funded.
And how well does crowdfunding actually work for really large-scale productions, like the big-budget films we see coming out of Hollywood? Can it truly replace traditional studio funding for a major blockbuster?
This is where the model faces pretty significant hurdles, especially for projects needing massive budgets and really extended timelines. Consider Star Citizen.
The video game.
Right, the space simulation video game. It's the largest crowdfunded entertainment project in history. It's raised over $400 million from about 3.3 million backers over 9 years.
Wow, that's a lot of money.
It is, and it was based on the promise of an essentially infinite amount of playable game time and content. Yet best estimates are that the product still won't be delivered for maybe another 5 years.
Okay, so it takes time.
A lot of time and a lot of money. Now, compare that to James Cameron's Avatar.
Okay.
That cost $237 million to produce a single 2.4-hour movie. It took a decade to make, and its massive success relied heavily on positive word of mouth, extensive marketing, a clear release window with little competition, and that immersive cinema experience, especially the groundbreaking 3D.
Right, the event aspect.
Exactly. And if you look quickly at platforms like Kickstarter or GoFundMe, no crowdfunded film has ever gotten close to even $50 million, let alone Avatar's scale.
Why the difference?
Well, film, unlike an endlessly playable RPG like Star Citizen aims to be, often has a finite consumption time. It doesn't inherently generate the same kind of long-term engagement that might drive sustained crowdfunding over many years.
Okay.
So this highlights the inherent difficulty of scaling crowdfunding for the massive budgets often required for major cinematic productions. And it raises that fundamental question again: who should ultimately decide the model for an artist's income? Should it be the artist, the audience, the market? It's a complex economic and philosophical knot, really. It speaks to the different ways we try to incentivize creative work.
Okay, let's pivot again. You might think of pirates as the bad guys, right? Figures lurking in the shadows, purely driven by illicit gain. But what if, ironically, they're also unsung heroes of cultural preservation? This seems like a complete inversion of the traditional narrative we've been told.
It is a striking irony, isn't it? Discussions within the film community, particularly among archivists and cinephiles, those really passionate enthusiasts, they've often revealed this observation, that thieves, or pirates as they're commonly called, are sometimes the most trustworthy and keen individuals when it comes to preserving rare or otherwise inaccessible films.
Really? More trustworthy?
In some specific cases, yes. They operate where commercial interests often fail. They inadvertently step into a void left by official channels, and sometimes even by the creators themselves who might have lost interest or rights.
Can you give us a concrete example of this, something that really highlights this bizarre paradox for, say, a widely known film?
A really compelling example is the original Star Wars release.
Okay, Star Wars.
It is literally impossible today to legally watch the original theatrical cut of Star Wars, A New Hope, the version where Han famously shot first.
Right, because George Lucas changed it later.
Exactly. He later extensively altered the films for re-releases on DVD, Blu-ray, streaming,
Yeah.
making the original version commercially unavailable. He essentially locked away the original from legal access, much to the frustration of purist fans.
Okay, so where do the pirates come in?
Well, dedicated fan efforts, like Harmy's Despecialized Editions, have meticulously pieced together high-quality versions of Star Wars and The Empire Strikes Back in their original theatrical cuts.
How did they do that?
By using multiple sources, older formats like Laserdisc, maybe even VHS, then cleaning up and painstakingly scaling the footage frame by frame to make it practically seamless.
Wow, that's dedication.
Incredible dedication.
Yeah.
And these unofficial efforts fill a crucial void. They demonstrate that when legal avenues for access are non-existent, external, often unauthorized efforts become a de facto method of cultural preservation, keeping that original version alive.
So it's not just about famous blockbusters then. What about films that fall through the cracks of the legal system entirely, becoming what you called gray market films?
Exactly. This is where the issue of gray market films comes in. These are works that lack clear legal owners, maybe the rights are tangled or expired. They exist in a kind of commercial limbo,
And they're at risk.
at significant risk of being lost permanently if not for unofficial preservation efforts. They might have zero distribution, maybe they only had very short theatrical runs decades ago. They're just commercially unviable for official restoration by studios or archives.
So the official channels just ignore them?
Pretty much. And this reveals a fundamental flaw in the traditional approach to preservation. Legal and commercial interests can inadvertently jeopardize cultural heritage simply by not valuing certain works enough to preserve them. Piracy, in these specific contexts, can function as this crucial method of cultural preservation by maintaining access to films that would otherwise just vanish into obscurity.
Huh.
You even find instances of dedicated users ripping short films from platforms like Vimeo and uploading them to private trackers not for profit, but explicitly to archive them elsewhere, just to ensure their survival beyond the lifespan of a single platform or the whim of a distributor.
Before the digital age, though, film itself presented incredible preservation challenges. You mentioned the highly flammable nitrate film, the slow decay of formats. What was lost due to the physical nature of film, and what have we gained, maybe, with digital preservation?
The physical characteristics of film directly informed its preservation challenges, often with truly catastrophic consequences. Early celluloid nitrate film, which was used extensively until the 1950s, was notoriously dangerous.
How so?
It's extremely flammable, prone to self-ignition, produced poisonous fumes. It necessitated storage in specialized concrete bunkers.
Wow.
And when more stable acetate film emerged in the 1950s, the practice of just burning old nitrate films for safety became common, which led to the permanent loss of, well, estimates suggest maybe half of all films made before 1950. Just gone.
Half. That's staggering.
A huge loss to our cultural history. And even beyond the inherent dangers, there's been this dramatic decline in the number of film labs globally equipped for archival work. Things like wet-gate printing or being nitrate certified.
Skills are disappearing.
Exactly. It means a significant loss of specialized knowledge and experience related to traditional film handling and restoration, as expertise naturally shifts towards digital technologies.
So as we move deeper into the digital era, what are the new challenges? And how do we ensure that these digital transfers truly capture the essence of the original analog films? It can't just be about making a perfect digital copy, can it?
Precisely not. The challenges of digital preservation lie in faithfully representing the original artifact. For instance, duplicating film for restoration, whether you're doing it analog to analog or scanning it digitally, can subtly affect the rendering of original colors. It's a critical nuance.
Okay.
So when analog films are digitally transferred, the aim is to maintain those material characteristics, the grain, the contrast, the specific color properties.
Why is that so important?
It's crucial to remind spectators of the original analog nature of the work, and also to generate interest in the museum context from which these preserved films often derive their value now. It's about respecting the film's unique status as an artifact. There's a documentary, Peter Kubelka, Restoring Enthusiasm, that highlights these complexities preserving artistic intent across different media. True restoration isn't just technical reproduction. It's about understanding and preserving the unique aesthetic and physical qualities of the original medium.
This sounds like a profound shift in how film history and preservation are viewed. How have cinematics, those specialized film archives and museums, how have they evolved in their philosophy towards preserving cinematic heritage over time?
Yeah, there has been a notable transition in cinematics. They moved from what was often a more subjective cinephile-driven approach, guided by individual passions and tastes.
Right, like one person's favorite films get saved.
Kinda, yeah. To what's now considered a more rational administration of memory. This shift was influenced by big international organizations like FIF, the International Federation of Film Archives, and UNESCO.
How did they influence it?
They started connecting these cultural institutions to national political bodies. This elevated film heritage, framing it as a factor for the sustainability of national and European history and identity. It moves film beyond just entertainment to being seen as a vital cultural record.
Okay.
And the prevailing film as art, archiving philosophy, which is central to these institutions, defines film as a unique art object, an artifact, intrinsically tied to a singular authorial vision. So it emphasizes preserving its material characteristics to generate interest in that museum context, where the film itself becomes an exhibit.
And how has the advent of digital media, particularly things like DVDs, played a role in this evolving philosophy? You might think digital would erode the love for physical archives, but it sounds like it might have fostered it in some surprising ways.
Ironically, yes. Despite those earlier fears about digital copies destroying value, DVDs have actually become instrumental in passing on cinephile traditions and a love for film history to younger generations.
Oh, so.
Well, you have these specialized publishers. Think Eureka Classics with their Masters of Cinema series, or Revoir, which focuses on experimental and avant-garde cinema. They meticulously curate and release films that would otherwise be completely inaccessible.
Right, films you'd never find on Netflix.
Exactly. And these releases often include extensive extras, commentaries, interviews, restored versions. They provide unparalleled access to classic and new wave directors, fostering a wider, deeper appreciation of film history beyond just the mainstream blockbusters.
That's great.
Furthermore, we're seeing an increasingly important role played by private cinephiles, sometimes called paracynephiles, who are becoming de facto archivists themselves.
Private citizens as archivists.
Yeah. This happens partly because institutional film archives, facing limitations like lack of space and funds, sometimes have to de-accession parts of their collections. They get rid of stuff.
So individuals pick up the slack.
In some cases, yes. It highlights the need to find value in unexpected sources for preservation. Notable examples include collectors like Roddy McDowall, who amassed a huge collection of films, or Carl Van Vechten, known for his scrapbooks documenting gay male Congress, or Marjorie Smoot with her Cabinet of Transgression holding star souvenirs.
Wow.
These private collections, though maybe unconventional, often safeguard cultural material that institutions might neglect. It really illustrates how passion can fill institutional gaps.
Okay, so if their initial Boston Strangler approach didn't quite work out for the VCR, how did the industry then evolve their strategy to control content in the digital age? It feels like their plan became much more sophisticated, this meticulously crafted, trusted system. But how trusted is it really in practice, and who actually benefits the most from it? Let's maybe quickly recap the MPAA's journey to this point first.
Right. The Motion Picture Association, or MPAA as it was known for decades, has a long history. Founded way back in 1922 as the MPPA. Initially, its goal was ensuring the viability of the American film industry. That involved establishing guidelines for film content, most famously, the Hays Code, implemented in 1930, which dictated moral standards for films.
Yeah.
Very strict.
Right, the Hays Code.
That was later replaced by the voluntary film rating system in 1968, which Jack Valenti himself developed. He added ratings like PG-13 later in 1984.
Okay, the ratings we know today.
Exactly. And throughout its history, especially from 1975 onwards with that Film Security Office we mentioned, the MPAA has been in this constant fight against copyright infringement, continuously adapting its strategies as technology evolved from VHS to digital file sharing. Now, the trusted system you mentioned, that represents an attempt to create an impenetrable solution to piracy, a much more sophisticated approach than just trying to ban hardware like the VCR.
How is it more sophisticated?
It's this complex interlinking of technological, legal, institutional, and even rhetorical elements, all designed to carefully direct consumer activity and maintain industry control.
Okay, break that down. What are the components?
Well, technologically, you have digital rights management, DRM, acting as a barrier to unauthorized copying. A key example early on was the Content Generation Management System Digital, or CGMSD. That was an attempt to embed copy control directly into the hardware of devices, trying to prevent even the very first copy from being made.
Okay, technology. What else?
Legally, there's the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, the DMCA. passed in 1998.
Yeah.
Crucially, it prohibits circumventing copyright encryption schemes, makes breaking the locks illegal.
Got it.
Beyond tech and law, you have complex contractual agreements between all the companies involved, studios, hardware manufacturers, software developers, and of course, extensive lobbying efforts to influence legislation, ensuring these systems are not only implemented, but also legally enforced. It's an attempt to create this cohesive top-down control mechanism, a comprehensive strategy for digital content.
It certainly sounds like an airtight system on paper. But what about the reality? Did it work as perfectly as it was designed to? Or were there, unexpected challenges in actually implementing it?
Well, interestingly, internal challenges within the MPAA itself have been acknowledged. Dean Garfield, a former executive there, actually revealed that despite the ideal of seamless integration, the system had many problems and leaks during its chaotic and disruptive early days.
Leaks. Problems.
Yeah. He noted that while the pillars of the system, the legal regimes, institutions, technology people were in place, the relationships and the integration between these systems were fairly new and undergoing constant stress tests from new technologies.
So it wasn't running smoothly.
It suggests the actual execution of the trusted system was far messier than the theoretical ideal. It was constantly requiring adjustments, revealing vulnerabilities. It shows that even the best-laid plans encounter friction in the real world.
Let's delve deeper into DRM for a second. You mentioned it acts as a technological barrier, but critics argue it does more than just prevent copying. They claim it sometimes oversteps its original intent and can actually stifle legitimate uses. What's behind that argument?
That's right. While DRM technologies like CGMSD are designed to prevent unauthorized copying, critics argue that DRM often extends beyond the original intent of copyright law itself.
How so?
Instead of merely protecting against copyright infringement, it effectively acts as a kind of private governance system. Through computer code, DRM regulates consumer actions. It dictates what users are authorized to do with content they've legitimately acquired.
Even if they bought it fair and square.
Exactly. And this can potentially stifle creativity and fair use. It limits how individuals might interact with or transform copyrighted works, even in ways that would traditionally be considered legal under the fair use doctrine.
Can you give an example?
Sure. If you can't rip a DVD you own to watch on your tablet while traveling, that restriction is coming from the DRM, not from copyright law itself. It's the code imposing that limitation.
And what's the ultimate goal of the industry's use of DRM then, if not necessarily to make hacking completely impossible? Because it seems like an unwinnable arms race, so what are they really hoping to achieve?
You're right, it's generally not about making hacking impossible. The industry's goal with DRM is more about making hacking economically unfeasible.
Okay, explain that.
They recognize that, sure, a major government agency like the NSA could probably crack their systems quickly, but they're less worried about that and more about, say, organized crime groups or large-scale Juarez groups, those organized outfits that quickly release pirated software, movies, music.
Right, the ones distributing it widely.
Exactly. So their strategy is to make the cost of exploiting the system astronomically high, requiring customized electronics, maybe brutal, labor-intensive hacking tasks. The idea is to make it so difficult and expensive that unauthorized copiers are driven towards lower-quality methods, like camcording in a movie theater.
Ah, push them towards the bad copies.
It's a deliberate shift in strategy. Accepting a perfect solution isn't possible, and instead trying to make the unauthorized copies less appealing. The benefit for the studios is that camcorded copies, being lower quality, are less desirable for consumers. And crucially, they can be forensically watermarked.
Watermark.
Yeah, with invisible marks containing data like the time and the media block serial number.
Yep.
This allows studios to track the source of the leak, making it easier to identify which movie screens might be popular with pirate crews and then target those locations.
It also sounds like there's significant pressure on legitimate content creators and distributors to actually adhere to these standards, even if they're not thrilled about them. It's almost like a non-negotiable part of getting their work out there.
Oh, absolutely. There's significant pressure on filmmakers and distributors to play ball with industry standards, like obtaining a DVD CSS license, which governs how content is encrypted and played.
And if they refuse?
Refusal can result in severely limited distribution. It's kind of akin to a film receiving an NC-17 rating. It drastically restricts its theatrical release and overall audience reach.
So you have to comply to get seen.
It's basically a quid pro quo. If you want your film widely distributed through mainstream channels, you have to agree to comply with the established DRM and content protection rules. The industry, as one executive noted, was trying to ensure that a new format like DVD would actually be adopted widely. Credible threats from major studios like Disney and Fox, who initially held out on supporting DVD, eventually ensured compliance across the board. This pressure ensures wide adoption of their control mechanisms.
Okay, let's talk about the legal battles themselves, particularly how the industry strategy was carried out and, how the results were evaluated. What were some of the high-profile cases and their public reception?
In terms of legal enforcement, the FBI and Department of Justice launched some significant investigations, notably Operation Copycat and Operation Sightdown.
What did they do?
These initiatives led to the dismantling of major piracy networks. They specifically targeted those whereas groups we mentioned, the ones responsible for large-scale online distribution of newly released movies, games, software, music.
Did they get convictions?
Oh, yes. These operations resulted in numerous convictions. One example was the sentencing of an individual nicknamed Fish back in 2006 for conspiracy and criminal copyright infringement across multiple jurisdictions, including charges for circumventing encryption technology.
So sending a message.
Exactly. These cases were intended to send a clear message about the serious legal consequences of large-scale digital piracy, demonstrating the government's commitment to protecting intellectual property. There was also the Copyright Alert System. Remember that?
Vaguely. What was it?
It was a joint effort by major ISPs and content owners, operating from about 2013 to 2017. It involved sending millions of warning notices to Internet users alleged to be infringing copyright, kind of a six-strike system.
And were these legal victories always as clear-cut and resounding as the industry perhaps presenting them to be? It sounds like there might have been some mixed messaging sometimes.
Not always, no. There was definitely controversy. For example, surrounding the MPAA settlement with the file hosting service Hotfile.
What happened there?
The MPAA initially claimed this huge $80 million victory in the settlement. It was a very public declaration of success, clearly designed to be a deterrent.
Right.
However, later revelations, particularly stuff that came out through the Sony email leak, showed that the actual settlement amount was only $4 million.
4 million, not 80.
$4 million. So significant discrepancy between the public claim and the reality. And that potentially undermines public trust in the industry's pronouncements about its successes in combating piracy.
Yeah.
It's an important instance of needing to check the result more closely rather than just accepting the initial headlines.
Okay, here's a specific anecdote that really shows the personal and professional stakes involved in this whole war on piracy. And it involves a famous actor, Roddy McDowall. It really seems to blur the lines between being a collector and being a pirate.
Ah, yes, the Roddy McDowall raid. That was a dramatic moment back in 1974. It really was a watershed moment.
What happened exactly?
McDowall, a prolific actor, Planet of the Apes, lots of other films, and former child star, was also a passionate collector of Hollywood memorabilia and films. He had a huge private collection.
Okay.
The FBI, armed with a search warrant, raided his North Hollywood home. They seized hundreds of film prints and videotapes. Initial reports said 500, later revised to over 1,000 videos and 160 16-millimeter prints.
That's a lot of material.
A huge amount. And this was considered a major get in the FBI's early war on film piracy. It sent this chilling message throughout the film, collecting subculture, instilled fear and paranoia that some say still lingers today.
Did McDowall face charges?
He actually avoided prosecution,
Yeah.
but he did so by naming other celebrities who had apparently purchased films from what the government considered bootleggers.
Wow. So he implicated others.
Yes. Which really blurred the lines, didn't it? Between a devoted film collector and someone potentially profiting from sales. While the government internally sort of implied he was a pirate, for many it was a complex situation. A collector might occasionally sell or trade prints just to sustain their hobby, rather than being involved in large-scale commercial operations.
Right.
This case just exemplifies the personal and professional stakes involved, where vague, fair use standards and aggressive litigation could have profound impacts on individuals, even those within the industry's inner circle.
And beyond these individual cases, what about the broader legal landscape? Has this aggressive pursuit of copyright infringement maybe stifled innovation or legitimate uses of technology in the long run?
Indeed, there's a significant argument to be made about the chilling effect of litigation and those often vague fair use standards.
Chilling effect.
Yeah, meaning it discourages people from doing things that might actually be legal, just that fear of being sued. Cases like Real DVD, where a company creating software to let users legally copy DVDs they owned, was sued into oblivion.
I remember that.
It demonstrated that courts often do not fully recognize fair use defenses for copying technologies, even for clear personal use. And this deters creators and consumers from exploring what might otherwise be legitimate uses of technology, like personal archives or maybe transforming works for new creative endeavors.
So innovation gets scared off.
Potentially, yes. Indie developers or artists might self-censor. They might avoid creating new tools or platforms for fear of legal challenge, even if their intent is for fair use or non-commercial application.
And critics have stronger words for this, right?
Oh, yes. Critics argue that copyright holders and large media conglomerates use these legal frameworks and extensive lobbying, for instance, influencing telecommunications policy to favor existing monopolies through things like spectrum giveaways, to perpetuate existing business models and stifle competition, rather than fostering a truly innovative and open digital landscape. It reflects an attempt to maintain control that critics argue hinders progress and creates barriers for new entrants.
Okay, it's easy to focus on Hollywood and its internal battles, but what's happening in other parts of the world, especially where film industries are structured very differently, how are they managing these challenges? Sometimes maybe by developing different solutions or maybe just coping with severe limitations. Let's look at South America, for example.
Right, in countries like Bolivia, film piracy, though illegal, is remarkably common, widespread.
Why is that?
Well, this prevalence isn't just about illicit activity. It's really a symptom of a deeply underdeveloped film industry there. Bolivia lacks the resources and funds for robust filmmaking. It has relatively few movie theaters and, crucially, very few spaces for exhibiting national films.
So local films struggle to get seen.
Hugely.
Mhm.
Traditional 35mm projection opportunities are rare. Expensive digital exhibition technology isn't widespread. For example, back in 2008, it was noted that high-quality digital exhibition tech existed but wasn't found in any Peruvian movie theaters yet. Moreover, national film industries in these regions often struggle to get consistent state support. In Peru, for instance, promised funds for organizations like Conocine often just fail to materialize.
So in that context,
In that context, piracy isn't just about illegal consumption. It functions as a crucial means of access.
Yeah.
And even, arguably, cultural preservation, where legal distribution is so limited. It challenges the top-down models of the West, where content access is tightly controlled, by creating this de facto alternative distribution network.
so piracy becomes almost a necessity for cultural engagement in those places. And what about the quality of the legitimate releases in these regions? Are they on par with what we might see in Western markets like the US or Europe?
Not typically, no. Many South American DVD releases, for example, often offer only very basic packages. They lack the extras we've come to expect: director commentaries, interviews, maybe multiple aspect ratio options.
Bare bones releases.
Very bare bones. And this can make them appear impoverished in global markets, especially when you compare them to U.S. distributors who, largely due to consumer pressure from home movie enthusiasts, generally release films in both their original aspect ratio and maybe a modified aspect ratio for different screens.
So the legal options aren't great anyway.
Right. This technological underdevelopment and lack of premium features further contributes to piracy filling the void. The more robust, feature-rich versions of films are often inaccessible legally, or maybe not even produced for those markets at all. So in this context, film piracy really opens up engagement with films. It allows heightened public access, it fosters new modes of consumption, and it fundamentally alters the way spectators interact with film products. There's a scholar, Brian Larkin, who studies media and culture, and he points out that powered infrastructure is a powerful mediating force that produces new modes of organizing sensory perception, time, space, and economic models.
That's a heavy quote.
Yeah.
What does it mean practically?
It means that in places like South America, piracy isn't just a parallel illegal distribution network. It's actually a way for cinematic culture to be formulated through a private sector that allows access where the authorized models, which are constrained by global flows that tend to favor foreign films and commercial interests, fail to provide it. It's a complex, adaptive response to a restrictive system.
This sounds like a much more collaborative and maybe audience-driven approach to filmmaking and distribution, which contrasts sharply with the traditional Western top-down models we've been talking about. Are there specific examples of filmmakers or initiatives that really embody this different approach?
It's a significant contrast, yeah.
Mhm.
Consider the work of Jorge Sanjins in Bolivia. He's a renowned filmmaker who placed great emphasis on allowing audience discussion to actually determine future films.
Really? The audience decided.
To a large extent, yes. He even incorporated local languages and storytelling devices based directly on spectator criticism and suggestions. You can see this in his films like El Coraje del Pueblo, The Courage of the People, and El Enemigo Principal, The Principal Enemy. His goal was wide circulation in a way that fostered interaction and community ownership of the narratives.
That's fascinating. Any other examples?
Well, similarly, you have initiatives like microscenes in Peru. These act as community engagement spaces, places for reflection and entertainment, often managed by community leaders, where films are screened and then discussed collectively.
Like community film clubs.
Kind of, but deeply integrated into the community fabric. Furthermore, global platforms like YouTube and even IMDb offer spectators the chance to reclaim some participation in cinema on a global level, outside the traditional industry control that often limits that two-way dialogue between production companies and audiences. These are all clear examples of developing different models moving away from the typical top-down distribution and consumption towards more participatory, community-oriented cinema.
Okay, let's move back to Hollywood for the final stretch. How has the industry adapted to the continuous challenges it's faced since, say, the mid-20th century, culminating in this recent, very accelerated shift towards streaming services? It seems like they're always reacting to some new disruption.
Hollywood has indeed faced enduring challenges since the 1950s. That decade marked the effective end of the traditional studio system, where studios controlled pretty much every aspect of filmmaking, from production to exhibition.
Right, the Paramount decrees.
Exactly. And then the rise of television, plus increased leisure options for people. It created what was called a dangerous middle for films. Those movies that weren't huge blockbusters but would have once made decent money, they started struggling. Harry Cohn, the head of Columbia Pictures, observed way back in 1957, the one absolute disaster today is to make $1 million mediocrity.
So go big or go home.
Pretty much. This forced a significant shift towards fewer, larger budget films. And from the 1990s onward, Hollywood evolved into what's often called conglomerate Hollywood.
What does that mean?
Major studios transformed. They became more like backer distributors for larger media entities rather than being primary production companies themselves. Think about the big five studios today. Only Disney really remains a primary production company in the old sense. The others function more like the old United Artists did, primarily backing and distributing films produced by others.
And the most recent, most dramatic shift has been accelerated by the pandemic, right? I mean, the closure of cinemas must have had a profound impact on those traditional distribution models.
Precisely. The COVID-19 pandemic significantly accelerated the shift away from traditional movie theaters and towards streaming services, Netflix, Hulu, Apple TV, plus Optus, all the rest. It pushed audiences en masse towards home viewing.
Forced their hand, really.
Absolutely. It further disrupted established distribution models, forcing a rapid reevaluation of release strategies, day-and-date releases, shorter theatrical windows, etc. But we can also look back and see how crises often force innovation and adaptation.
Like the VCR boom.
Exactly. And now, for instance, there's talk of the relic path for, say, Philippine cinema on streaming platforms. It's an attempt to recreate the cinema situation, the feeling of going to the movies through memory and habit rather than just pure spectacle. It demonstrates a flexible adaptation to new digital realities. Streaming isn't just about convenience. It's about trying to evoke that communal experience of cinema through different means. The traditional cinema experience, once defined by a physical venue, now branches into various forms online. Icons, the film itself, expiry, limited availability, time slots, scheduled viewing, and relics, archival content. Streaming platforms become both archives and delivery systems, connecting viewers to the film itself in new ways.
So finally, what does all of this mean for the next generation of filmmakers, for film students learning their craft right now, especially with so much change constantly swirling around them?
Well, this ongoing disruption really underscores the immense importance of continued film education, especially during such transformative periods. As educators, for example, in the Philippines have articulated, students are uniquely positioned to tell our stories in the future. They need to embrace new production methods and challenge traditional definitions of cinema.
Adapt or perish, basically.
In a way, yes. They're encouraged to work with the limitations of current situations, finding empirical evidence that new filmmaking methods are possible. Look at someone like Lav Diaz, the Filipino director known for slow cinema.
Slow cinema.
Yeah, he leverages digital technology to create incredibly long-duration films, sometimes 4, 6, even 10 hours long.
10 hours, wow.
And these films deliberately challenge Hollywood's traditional focus on fast-paced narrative, on event-driven plots. Instead, they invite a more contemplative, immersive viewing experience. It's a clear example of developing new artistic expressions and consumption models in film production. It shows how new technologies can enable entirely new forms of artistic expression and consumption, moving beyond just comparing it to what came before and truly shaping the future of the medium.
And that brings us pretty much to the end of this deep dive. Wow. We've seen how the definition of intellectual property and piracy has been shaped by, well, rapidly advancing technology, evolving economic models, and even the surprising acts of cultural preservation. It's a landscape that is just constantly shifting beneath our feet, isn't it? Demanding continuous reevaluation.
Indeed. I mean, from Jack Valenti's initial, almost hysterical prediction about the VCR being a Boston Strangler,
Yeah.
to the complexities of digital rights management and the unexpected, sometimes vital role of piracy in preserving cinematic heritage. The journey has been anything but linear. It's this constant negotiation, isn't it, between control and access, creation and consumption, often forcing industries to assess the real-world outcomes, check their results, and develop alternative strategies for navigating this evolving landscape.
So, what does this all mean for you, our listener, as you navigate this increasingly digital world? How do we, maybe as a society, move forward in understanding these complex layers of ownership and access?
Well, maybe our flashcard list today can offer a snapshot, some key elements from this complex issue, inviting you to further examine these concepts and perhaps, derive differently your own conclusions about the future of creative works. Let's see. Key terms to remember: intellectual property, obviously, piracy, counterfeiting, remember the difference. DRM, digital rights management, fair use, MPA, Motion Picture Association, formerly MPAA, VCR, video cassette recorder, the Hays Code, DMCA, Digital Millennium Copyright Act, cinephilia, paracinephilia, those dedicated collectors, Juarez groups, the trusted system concept, crowdfunding, nitrate film, and slow cinema.
Got it. What about core concepts?
Key concepts: artificial scarcity, that's a big one. Cultural preservation, especially the unexpected kind. The economic impact of digitalization, that constant tension. Industry control versus public access. The evolution of media distribution, VCRs to streaming. The role of disruptive technology, those lottery-like payouts in creative industries. Opportunity costs for creators. Downloading bulimia, gray market films, and the chilling effect of litigation.
Okay. Any key figures?
Key figures we mentioned: Jack Valenti, definitely. Jorge Sanjines, the Bolivian filmmaker. Roddy McDowall, the actor caught in that raid. Dean Garfield, the MPAA executive who spoke about the trusted systems problems.
Yeah.
Jack Conte of Patreon. Lav Diaz, the Filipino director. And Brian Larkin, the media scholar.
And finally, some key dates to maybe pin these events.
Key dates. Okay, 1922, MPPDA founded. 1930, Hays Code. 1968, the MPAA rating system. 1974, the Roddy McDowall raid. 1975, the Film Security Office. 1982, Valenti's VCR prediction. 1984, PG-13 rating added and the Betamax case ruling. 1998, DMCA passed. Maybe 2006 for Operation Copycat convictions. 2008, Blu-ray winning the format war. And roughly 2013-2017 for the copyright alert system being in operation.
Okay, that's a great recap. So here's a final provocative thought for you, the listener, to mull over. Given this complex interplay we've discussed, technological advancement, economic pressures, evolving social norms, how might we fundamentally redefine ownership in the digital realm? To truly serve both creators and the public good, is there a better balance?
Or maybe consider this. How might a different initial approach to digital distribution, one perhaps emphasizing accessibility and fair pricing over strict control and litigation from the get-go, how might that have fundamentally altered the entire landscape of media consumption and preservation as we know it today?
What stands out to you as the most surprising grain of discovery from our deep dive today? And how might that shape your own views on consuming and supporting creative works in the future?